Okay,
Mhm.
there she is. That's whose house we're going to.
This one.
Yeah. It's now 26. Yep.
Yeah, and has a child about her size.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, if we're gonna do a whole property, it gets more complex, but we're the same basics of apply. So we did a garden first. You understand what a 0 point is, a fixed point where I can reliably lay a tape measure again at a 90-degree angle, corner of the building, the corner apart. I mark and label that point on the paper. I might say house southwest corner. At Pat's house, I measured everything from the edge of that wing wall that's sticking out from the front of the house there. That was my 0 point. Everything got measured from there. My paper didn't look like this to start with. To start with, it just had a right angle in the top right corner of the paper, and it had a bunch of notations of
Yep.
measurements. And that's what we're going to work on first. So you're going to lay out the tape perpendicular to the 0 point, and there's a way to do this called 3-4-5 triangulation. You're going to lay out about 10 feet of tape. You're going to lay out 10 feet of tape. That's the blue line there. And you're going to make it look as much as a right angle from wherever you're measuring from the back of the house or the patio or whatever. You're going to make it do it as right angle as you can. If it happens to be the corner of a house or the corner of a patio, you have an added advantage of you can pull the tape back along the side of the wall, and it helps you line it up. But lay it out as close as you can get to perpendicular. And then go to the 4-foot mark on the blue line on the tape. Go to the 4-foot line there and make yourself a mark in the ground. Maybe stick something in the ground. And then go 3 feet along whatever the item is that you're trying to be perpendicular to. Mark that 3-foot spot. And between those two, if you stretch your carpenter's tape, that should be exactly 5 feet. If it's not 5 feet, then you've got to move your tape. You've got to swing your tape left or right. Once you've got it triangulated there about 4 feet from the wall, stake it somehow. Put a pin over it, put a rock on top of it, so that as you pull out the rest of the tape and you're walking 50 feet away, you can look back and see whether your tape is angling from that point or whether it's coming straight from that point. Because you want your measurements to be straight, or it's amazing how in 50 feet, how many feet off you can
Oh, if
be.
you're 2 inches off, it could really start to throw things.
That's called 3-4-5. And it's easy to remember, because how could the 5 be anywhere except be the long side of the triangle? I work with 2 tapes usually because I'm going to need 2 coordinates for everything that I map. So I've stretched my tape straight from the corner of the garage all the way out pretty much to the street.
Well, wait,
Almost all the way to the street. I need a second tape, and I think I've marked it at about 20 feet. I've taken a second tape across because I'm going to need 2 coordinates, and I'll show you that a little bit later. If I don't have 2 tapes, I can use small stakes, and every 10 feet along that line, I can put a stake in while I've got that stretched out, and now I know where my tape was, but I use 2 tapes to do it. So I'm going to walk along the tape now, and I'm going to mark the distance of whatever is important from that tape to my 0 point. So I walk along and see that I've got at 16 feet out. So I'm 16 feet along my first tape. I'm coming level with the trunk of the oak tree. And I can use my carpenter's tape if it's close by and reach out perpendicular to my first tape and say it's 6 feet over. So my oak trunk now is 16 north, 6 west.
Yep.
And I mark that on there. I want one side or the other, because I want to know exactly where that crabapple's trunk is when I'm deciding how many things I'm going to put where. And I want them to be able to stay put where we put them in the first place. And a lot of plants can fit into that space.
A lot of plants.
We're looking at where that tape was originally. And I can even look at things that are further away. If I stand at the tape and square myself off to the tape, I can get across from the trunk of that tree and mark where it is. And I can always triangulate the other tape too. I can put a peg down and see how straight I am going out to that trunk of the tree. I can measure to each of those trees across the front of the house. I can measure to the wall of the house from there. I can measure anything, and I'm gonna mark that on my paper. Everything's got 2 coordinates. Red maple at 15 feet out, 15 feet north, and 6 feet west.
There it is.
If you don't let the tape get hung up on too many things, this one got hung up on a sucker on the base of the crabapple. And that can put your
That
foot
can
off.
affect.
It's not
Yep.
probably for most of the things that we do, as I tell people,
Not a big
it's
deal.
not rocket science what we're doing. We don't have to be within an inch of something to figure out tolerances and fits. But it does help to be a little closer than to lose 2 feet because you strung it over the top of a bush. And from in most yards, that one line, I can walk along with a carpenter's tape, with a rigid tape, and I can stand anywhere there and measure to the edge of that, the edge of the grass, and I can get that plotted all along there. I can just at every 5 feet, I can make another note. Say 5 at 25 feet, the edge is 6 feet north, and at 25 at 30 feet, it is
12
4
feet.
feet north. Yeah.
Whatever.
I can measure all along the way, and I can measure to the trunks of those trees. I can measure to the drip lines of the trees, because the drip line is important for what will or will not grow.
Especially if the garden
Yeah.
going in.
So I'm gonna have a second tape out there, if I can do that, and have everything have 2 points. So measuring that curved edge, there's your tape, and you measure that it's 10 feet north and 4 feet east, and so you go 4 feet is two blocks, 10 feet along the tape. Our 0.70 are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blocks and 2 blocks over. And at 18 feet, which is 9 blocks, so 4 more blocks up, it's 6 or 3 blocks over. And you can put the dots on when you get inside the house, and then you just connect the dots.
And you just, yep.
Which is what I did here at Jay and Natalie's. Quite often, and I couldn't find any of mine. I guess I get rid of most of them after I get them transferred to paper. But your coordinates then might look like rungs on a 1-rail ladder. You just keep marking as you go along. There's an oak at 30 feet east and 60 feet south. There's an elm at 64 feet east and 20 feet south. And the drip line of the spruce starts at 70 east, 12 north, and goes all the way to 80 east, 12 north. I end up with all these little notations, and I'm going to sit down inside or at a table on a patio, and I'm going to start counting squares on my paper. And I almost guarantee you that if you need the whole paper to show the backyard here, for instance, that if you put your 0 point right here, you'll find out that you needed another inch on the other side.
Definitely.
I can't tell you how many times I start counting squares and realize, oh shoot, I should have started a little bit over. So it does help to have figured out ahead of time how big a paper, how much you can fit onto the paper. And the same thing goes from taking the design then afterwards. For instance, we're working with our friend who's down near Charleston, South Carolina, and I drew some things in her backyard for her, and I'm going to help her put them together now. So we drew them last year. Now we want to recreate those lines. And to recreate those lines, we can measure on this piece of paper that's there. We can measure on the piece of paper. Let's see, that edge of that bed that we drew measures this far on the paper up and this far over, and that equates to 74 feet and 27 feet. So I can mark that, and I mark it on the paper, and then I can walk outside, pull the tape measure back out, put little stakes in the ground and connect the dots in real life. So I'm transferring all of the measured items to the graph paper. And I want my scale to fit that longest line on whatever paper it is. Put your 0 points down and just start counting squares. And at this point, a lot of people say, I can't do that.
Yeah.
That's just too much detail work. It is detail work. It pays off if you need it for a contractor, if you need it for keeping collections, if you really want to have a cool drawing for a tour, but it might not be worth your while to do all of that. I enjoy doing it most of the time. Sometimes it gets to be, especially when I have to Yeah, especially when I have to pack everything up and drive all the way back out to someplace because I realize that
Because mismeasured
right,
or
I put everything down the way my coordinates say, and something doesn't look right, and then I have to go back and find out that I misnoted something.